My reed scraping has been rather circuitous. I started off reading J-Light from the book because I never had a proper reed instruction. So I was doing from a book without any oral concept of how to do reeds. And then post my master's, I found out about David Weber book, and then subsequently his DVD, and started doing that. And it was the DVD that gave me the clues, because it gave me
the sound.
More important, the sound, what was going. So what he does is activates the tip and then goes farther back. And I discovered that this is actually the Philly school of reed making. Discovered that within the past year. So that's what I do. I activate the tip and then go into the back and everything through that route. I play a Rigota J and a Malern thin wall English horn from the 60s.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a wonderful horn. And I also play Baroque. And the reason I'm here in this group, my modern is now solid, but I need to transfer that solidity and everything into my Baroque, and let's call it period, because I play everything from Baroque to modern. So I want to transfer all of that into this. And Jennet is my secret weapon for English horn playing. I've had a Ross Gouger since roughly 1980, and discovered how really wonderful Ross Gouge is within the last year or two, and then went, oh, who has Ross gouged English horn cane? So I've been ordering my English horn cane from Jennet for about 2 years now, and it works. Thank you, Jennet.
You are so welcome. I like that gouge, although boy, if I ever get off the waiting list for the Inaletti English horn gouger, I may move away.
And then you get to relearn how to make reeds on a completely different gouge.
Well, I don't anticipate it being a problem, actually. Cool, great to meet you.
Angelika, you're next on my screen.
Hello, I'm from Austria. I have a short scrape. I have a Munich English horn and oboe, and all modern instruments, and Laurie Oboe de More. And I admire your systemic working, and I would like to think like you. So I'm yes.
Wonderful. It's great to meet you.
Beate, you're next.
Yes, I am from Germany, and I'm playing baroque oboes since for about 15 years, and I'm learning with Jeanine. I was learning with Jeanine. I'm doing the long scrape, the American long scrape. And I saw your lesson last week in the workshop of Oboe Reed Fundamentals.
Yeah.
And I must say, I'm more brave. I became more brave last week to work on them. And yesterday I got your reed structure checklist. That's also very interesting. And yes, I'm curious for today.
Wonderful.
Birgit, you're next.
Hi, I'm Birgit. So I'm from Germany too. I am amateur. I'm playing. I started playing on the Yamaha pupils instrument. Now I'm playing marigot. Since 2.5 years, I'm in music school orchestra, and I started with oboe. So it's 14 years ago, but I had a really big gap in between. So I'm almost playing maybe 6 or 7 years, and I learned from the beginning to do my own reed. I'm doing the European style, but I still, my teacher is finishing the reeds for me. So I'm now here going to try to get my reeds on loan too.
Yeah, getting to be like self-sufficient with reads. Great.
Yeah, and I was there last week too.
Oh,
I was
wonderful.
Yeah, but I don't
Great.
have any experience with the American long scrape.
Understood.
Maria, last but not least, and in Maria's defense, she tried very hard to be involved in the knife session, but the problem broke down on my side. I'm still working on fixing it. So Maria, it's now the last shall be the first and the first shall be the last, or something like that.
Okay, hello. Good morning, everyone. Jennet, my read therapist, I called you last night.
I know.
I discovered you on YouTube about 6 months ago. Okay, I tell you about me. I live in Colombia. I lived in England for 20 years, where I studied early music and recorder. Going back behind, I did a bachelor's in oboe, in modern oboe, and I played for about 10, maybe 15 years, and then I stopped because my husband, who was also an oboe player, used to make the reeds for me. So we got divorced, and that was it.
Oh.
Because I couldn't make my own reeds. So
no.
Yeah, I just focused on the recorder, which I loved. That I love. So I stopped playing for many years. I bought a Richard Earl Baroque oboe in England about 20 years ago, and I took some lessons, but I didn't really get anywhere. So I stopped playing reed problem again, and then I got into the shawm world, which I come here for twice a year to Bloomington in Indiana, to play shawms with Bob Vimken. He has an early double reed workshop, which I love, and I think that really helped me play open up when going back to the oboe, because I heard from many of you that you have like tight high notes, and my notes are very wide except for the G. Okay, my oboe is a Richard Earl. My scrape, I think it's American because it's long. And I have lots of, I am a very manual person. I do lots of crafts, and my knife skills are pretty good because I do lots of woodworking as well, and spoon carving. So I have lots of beautiful tools. So you'll be surprised when you see my knives, because they're not like yours. I mean, I have the proper oboe scraping, oboe reed scraping knives, but I prefer the other ones you're going to see today. So that's me. I don't really do much playing, but I feel playing the oboe is part of my life, and I really missed it. And well, I want to get on with it this time and do some proper playing.
That's fantastic. I love this. I love it. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Jennet, as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot to tell you, I live in Colombia now, and I own a farm, a cattle farm. So I do cattle and citrus fruit. So,
amazing.
Okay, that's it.
Cool. I love how I love it how unique all of you people are. So I'm going to go ahead and say that what I'm planning to talk about today is I'm hearing you guys talk about systematization. So I sort of thought I would talk through my batch processing and how I get from a blank all the way through to a read and what I do each day. And on the way, I thought I would talk through all of my scraping techniques and how I actually get to those results. And I will admit freely that I don't know anything about short scrape reads really. and I don't know anything about Baroque reeds, really. I pretty much exclusively work with the American long scrape, but I believe quite deeply that the knife skills that I'm going to talk about and the systematization with tweaks will work for all situations, because cane is cane. And like the result that we want is the same in general, right? We want to be able to like play the oboe freely and comfortably, as if reeds were not a problem.
I totally agree with Jennet. It's a matter of maintaining your proportions, but the actual knife skills are, as far as I'm concerned, absolutely applicable. So stick to your proportions and your measurements, and try out these anyway. It won't even matter when you try it on the pencil. So.
Exactly. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate my camera around so that you guys can see my hands. And once I do that, I'm not going to be able to see you very clearly. So if you have a question, please at any time unmute yourself and holler at me, because I love to be interactive. And I would also love to hear dissenting views. If there's something that I'm saying that like contradicts something that you have been taught, or contradicts something that you believe to be true, let's talk about it, because my way is not the only way. It's just the way that works for me. And I love conversation about it. So let's see, move my camera. Close your eyes if you're going to get seasick. Okay? There's that. And then I'll get this out of the way.
I'm going to spotlight her view. If you guys do your screens properly, you should be able to see her big now. Can you see her big now? Good.
Okay.
Can.
So I've started out by just grabbing a couple of soaked blanks. They have basically nothing scraped off of them at all. And the first thing that I always do to a reed, this one appears like it might be cracked, so let's get rid of that. The first thing I do to a reed is the long scrape. I think it's really important, and I said this before in the knife skills class, which it seems like most of you had attended. A problem that I find people get into is hand position. So the first thing I like to think about is, how am I supporting the reed, the part of the reed that I'm scraping? And then how can my thumb and my forefinger here on my non-dominant hand, my left hand for me, I think that those really are the strength of my scrape. So my right hand really isn't doing much other than rotating. My left hand is pushing, is using my finger here to resist the knife as I scrape. And my left hand is really in charge of directing the scrape so that I go to exactly where I need to be with the strength that I need. And anything that I'm demonstrating here, if you feel like tentative about it, you can practice on a perfectly basic wooden pencil, because of course no one cries if you ruin a 79-cent pencil, but sometimes people cry if you ruin a piece of cane that you've already spent 15 minutes like carefully measuring and winding and processing. So the first thing that I do is a long scrape. And for me, this is actually one of the most important things, even though it is one of the easiest things, because if I can get enough wood off of my reed right away, I can like start some vibration happening right away. And then I can work from a place of vibration instead of working from a place of stiffness trying to find vibration. On the pencil, this just looks like this. I bring my knife from behind vertical and rotate it forward toward vertical. I think about it as pulling cane off rather than pushing cane off. I think about it as though I'm icing a cake. I want to use my spatula and like smoothly bring that icing along rather than like chipping or chiseling at the icing on top of my cake. And so if you feel like you need to practice this maneuver, it's just a long scrape from behind vertical to slightly before vertical, trying not to make your pencil look gouged or chipped. But if you're ready to tackle it on a reed, the thing that I do is this. I work on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side, because those two planes are very important. I never scrape directly up the middle of a reed. And I'll start with just about the top 8 millimeters or so, pulling cane off quite aggressively. I'm always thinking about angling outward toward the side, which I do with hand position primarily, this way for the right, this way for the left. And I'm also thinking about scraping downhill through the tip so that my end point is not the tip of the reed, but rather my finger. And because I'm in charge of this gesture, my thumb and forefinger are running it. I'm not going to hurt myself sticking my finger with my knife because, you know, I'm the boss of this gesture. I do it on the right.
Just going to interject.
I do it on the left. Hit me.
So where she starts her scrape is for the longer American tip. So this
yes,
is the first difference. So if you're making a short scrape reed, Angelica, you probably have a measurement for where your tip would begin, I'm guessing. So you would keep that long scrape that she's talking about now no further back than where the beginning of your tip would be. So that's, for me, it's about 65 on a regular modern oboe reeds. For you, where would that be for a reed for you, Angelica?
You know that it's a little very thin tip. Yes, it's
right.
70.
70.
70, and my reeds are 71.
Your reeds are 71, so where does your tip begin? So that would probably be at 67 or 68.
No, I have 1 millimeter.
Your tip
in the middle.
Your tip's only 1 millimeter?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So there you go.
So there, yeah. So fair enough. Like I am aware that this particular long scrape is going to apply primarily to my long scrapers. Once I've put in that initial 8 millimeters or so of like pretty aggressive downhill and outward scrapes, I'll back it up and I'll think about the basically just taking off bark in the approximate shape of a reed. I'm not particular about where this point down here, the beginning of that scrape, happens. Though for a short scraper, I think you do need to be very, very specific about that. What I am careful about is making sure that I'm not taking the bark off of the sides at this point. I do want a nice smooth rail of bark that maintains itself here. And I'm careful about not taking the spine too aggressively. So whereas up in the tip, I'm working outward and I'm thinking about planes, but I'm basically trying to just get all of the wood off. In this area, I'm thinking about a relatively narrow line that's between the spine and the rail that broadens a little bit as I get toward the heart.
I call these the channels.
Absolutely, so do I. And I think about this as almost like a snowplow. You know how if the snowplow comes this way, and if you just picture one side of it, it goes up like so. And well, here I am snow plowing upward, and I go ahead and allow it to broaden as I reach the top, even though I'm not deepening it much because this is going to be the heart of my reed. And the same on the other side. So I've left wood in the rails, I've left thickness in the spine, and I've taken off all of the bark in the windows and heart area, and I've put in a pretty strong slope in the tip.
Quick question.
Yep.
Your back scrape there, is that essentially more or less very close to where your final back length is going to be?
Oh, I never think about that bottom line again. So yes, it's almost exactly what my ultimate length is going to be.
Perfect.
Here's the other side, same thing. Quite aggressive at the tip. Because, you know, I don't want to be fussy about reeds, and I want them to work as fast as I can possibly get them to work. So I know that my tip is ultimately going to get like micro thin. I might as well get as much wood off as possible before it becomes delicate, before I get a plaque in, before I'm apt to wreck it.
A plaque is a Zunge, just so you know. She says
nice.
It's the Zunge.
Nice. Does that mean tongue? Is that the translation?
Yes.
Nice.
I didn't know you spoke German.
A little bit.
Good.
Okay. So once I have to put that long scrape in, I can feel under my fingers that I've got quite a bit of thinness up here. It's not flexible, actually. I'm like trying to make it look flexible, but it's not. But I can feel that there's a progression of thinness. I'll clip right away. And if I've done my job right with the long scrape, I might have vibration already, at least a little beep. Sometimes I have to, somebody's got it. So from there, I can start putting my tip in. Now, for me, that measurement of the bottom of the rooftop, the gutter of the rooftop, as I call it, right there, is about 65 millimeters. I'm confident that is different for many of you. But whatever your measurement is, and however steep or shallow you want your rooftop to be, this is a time to just sort of plot that out. I did drop a handout into the group that has just sort of my thoughts on the angles of those rooftops to generalize broadly. For me, the steeper the rooftop, the darker the reed, the more stable the reed, sometimes to a too stable kind of point. The stiffer it can be. And as you go up here, the shallower your rooftop, the more flexible, the more vibrant, the more bright. And none of these are good or bad qualities necessarily. It's just about what you're after. Does this jibe for people more or less? Okay. When I do this, I, again, am very aggressive in taking cane off because I don't want to waste time with it. The thing that I'm always thinking about is, how am I going to get from the relatively thick heart into the thin tip? And can I share my screen real quick? Whiteboard. So as I move from the thick heart into the thin tip, I could do it like that, but that's going to really strongly prevent vibrations from easily getting into the heart. I feel like I often see people do like this, so it looks like a city curb, and then there's even sometimes a thin place right there. That also gets real dangerous. I feel like I see people do a transition that's sort of like a handicapped ramp, like you might roll your aged grandmother up. That tends, on an American read anyway, to lead to a reed that's so big and flappy because there's no real stop between the tip down here and the heart up here. You find that as you start to tongue, the whole reed has to start vibrating right away. And so the reed can end up being really hard or really wild. There's a lot of weirdness that comes from this. And what I like best is a reed that's like a skateboard ramp. Here's the heart. Whoosh. And from here, assuming that your tip doesn't actually like re-slope up there, that's bad. Your vibration can start in the tip because it's nice and thin because there's consistent slope, and then can whoosh up into the heart and easily transition, easily but not too easily, I guess, transition into the heart, because this transition area gives you all of the comfortable resistance that you want in a reed, and like lets you set that level of resistance to your own comfort. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah.
So I try to do that. Sorry, go ahead.
I do believe this is the same principle for both the historical and for the short scrape methods. We have the ability to really control a lot about the quality that we want in a reed based on how we form that transition from the heart into the tip. So with the short scrape reed, it's a real precise process. With the Baroque reeds, we have the advantage of a lot of Oberfläche, surface area, a lot of surface area to make use of this, which means that we also get really quick feedback what everything we do means. So it's actually helped me to really grasp how these what sort of repercussions they have because of the simple largeness of a Baroque reed. gives you so much more to work with than especially a very, very small tip of the short scrape reed. So thank you, Jennet.
Sure. Yep. So there's plenty of ways to get that tip constructed, but my way is fast, which is why I like it. So I start with my knife right at the angle of that rooftop that I want to set in. I cut and curl that cane away. And there's a couple things I want you to notice about this scrape. The first one is that even though I start at the angle of the rooftop, I do rotate that knife as I go, so that by the time I'm at the tip where it's very thin, I'm cutting with the grain of the cane rather than trying to like slice against the grain. I find that I'm much more likely to shred that corner if I just keep going outward rather than upward. Of course, on the left, it works the same, right? I'm here and then I rotate upward. And then the other thing is that I like to think of this scrape as though I'm not working with delicate cane. Sorry, I'm re-soaking because I've been talking for a while. But as though I'm working with some material that actually does sculpt. So I like to pretend I'm working with like a cold stick of butter or a bar of soap, or I don't know what else. I feel like Maria might be a great resource on this, like what sculpts well with a knife. So I just sort of try to pretend that I'm not exactly scraping, I'm cutting or I'm slicing, and I'm going for that curl.
Jennet, I have a question.
Cane, like so. Yep.
So you actually press the knife into the cane to do the cut.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So describe, do you maintain the pressure, or do you let it up after that while you do the curl?
Let me think about that while I do the left side. I'm cutting. And then just like I'm diving shallowly into the water, I rotate so that I'm not, cutting anymore. I'm definitely using this kind of, can you see that? This. And I feel as though I'm still pressing. I'm using my thumb and forefinger. The forefinger is resisting the knife, coming back at the knife to direct where it's going. And no, I would not actually say that I'm taking a lot of pressure off, although after my initial few sculpting cuts, after my initial few curls, I definitely do go back to more of a gentle pulling cane off maneuver. This is much more like what I was doing in my long scrape.
Question?
Does that make sense? Yes, please.
So you scrape to where you clip, then you take off with the slice a lot of material, then you
Yes.
kind of finish with the scrape. Okay.
Yes.
Are you stroke counting, or are you by feel or by visual?
I'm definitely doing it by feel and by sight and not by stroke count. I feel like every piece of cane is different. Some of them, even though my gouger is, a precision machine, some of them feel thicker than others. Some of them are softer than others and the cane comes off more easily. Sometimes my knife is a little more dull because I'm a little sloppy about that, unlike Jeanine. So when I'm doing any of these steps, I go for function. So sometimes I'm working a little harder with the knife than others, depending on the piece of cane. Sometimes I'm taking more or fewer scrapes. But my goal is to get to this point where I can see a constructed tip. I can, I can feel the response in there. Yeah, and that's going to be the case actually with every one of my steps. It's not the case that on day 2 I pick it up and do like 5 strokes here, 5 strokes here, and 10 in the back, and then I set it away again. I'm going to scrape until like the next thing happens. And on each piece of cane, that's going to be a little bit different. Does that help?
Yep, thank you.
So here's my other blade. I'm just going to do the same things again. Right hand side, I cut, and then I rotate, and I'm basically just sculpting the tip that I want. As before, I'm always orienting this way when my knife is when I'm scraping on the right, and this way when I'm scraping on the left. So both hands are involved with getting myself to that angle, so that with every single stroke, especially at the tip, I'm taking more from the side than the center and stroking downhill through that tip of the tip.
I'm curious about one more thing before you make this cut right there.
Yep.
I'm curious about the change of angle. So you start with, as the cut, you're almost perpendicular. And what it's hard to see from our perspective is how that angle changes as you bring the curl off the end.
How the angle of the knife changes.
Yes, not in terms of, so let's see. So
Here, I'm gonna,
it looks like you
can I
start
see?
with the knife is fairly, can you see me now?
Yes, I can.
I'm gonna exaggerate it so you can see. It looks like
Yep.
that is almost, maybe even backwards a little bit, but it looks like then you quite flatten it down as you push it off. Is that what you're doing, or does it stay?
Yes, definitely. Let me see. Can I get to an angle? What if I do sideways like this? Is that visible? And can I do it? Let's find out. I'm cutting. And almost immediately, actually, I turn that angle of the knife more, it's more horizontal. I'm cutting up toward the tip. So I ended up almost sort of here. Is that seeable?
Yeah, that's what I was asking, yeah.
And then I'm going to do one more of those cut and curl maneuvers because I can't do more on this read. So yeah, it feels like I'm definitely down at like maybe a 15, 20 degree angle to the plaque by the time I get out to the tip. And having done that, having established that much, and I'm just getting it up in the camera, that much thinness to where my read is definitely easily beepable. Anything else I do at the tip at this point is going to be much, much gentler. So I'll come back to my sort of working behind vertical toward vertical, my pulling of the cane. And I'll think about just sort of like, I call this my pet and the kitty maneuver, where I just sort of scrape gently and let my knife feel for thickness. And as I get up to the corner and I've sort of collected a little clump of hair, if you've ever petted a kitty, you get toward the tail and suddenly you've got a whole bunch of just fur in your hand, and you just sort of scrape that through. Here I am again. I'm petting the kitty and I'm keeping my knife oriented toward the outside. By the time I get to the top, I've established some stuff, and then I just cut that off.
So I have a question.
Yes.
I need to light this up so you can see it. I probably have to sign up my other one. I actually just took off the whole tip.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, so I did something wrong. Any idea what I did wrong? Curl. I was trying to do the curl and all of a sudden I had no tip.
Okay. Part of it may be, so yes, you do have to like turn the knife so that you're cutting outward. So I think of it as like a shallow dive. A diver can go into the pool this way, straight down without a splash, or they can go into the pool if they're diving into the shallow end this way and then immediately level out so that they're swimming along the surface. And you need to be ready to level out so that you're immediately swimming along the surface rather than deep diving. So that's a risk in that curl. And then I wonder, is it possible that your knife is so much more beautifully sharp than mine that it is too sharp for this maneuver? Because
I did put down the first knife because it was too sharp, and this was the sharper one. So I probably went at it a little too aggressively. Yes, both of those make a difference. I tried the shallow dive thing, and that seemed to work.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yes,
Jennet,
Yep.
The knife that you're using now, that you're using to slice, do you have a bird on it, or is it?
Yeah.
It is a bird. It is a bird knife, like.
Yeah, I mean, I sharpen it like so, right? I sharpen it at like a 10 degree angle, at like a 30 degree angle,
Okay,
and then
so
I do one very flat one to smooth the burr but not eliminate it, I think. So it catches pretty easily here.
Okay. The other question is, when you're doing a slice, are you intentionally trying to continue the incline plane, or are you trying to take an equal amount, more or less, from the blend or the rooftop to the tip, and then you're going to adjust the incline when you're scraping rather than slicing?
I feel as though my slice and curl maneuver is intended to create the structure that I want, which is thinnest at the corner, thinnest at the side, a little bit thicker in the center. Like this thing that I do is definitely designed to build the slope exactly the way I want it. But it is definitely true that my small strokes, my pet and the kitty strokes, are more delicate and are more artful, and I definitely do need to get back in and clean that side and corner area most of the time.
So when you backlight after you've done a lot of the slice work,
yes,
you fundamentally see that you've got thickness differences, or do you see more of that with the slice or with the scrape afterwards?
Oh, say that again.
Okay, when you've been doing the slice work and you backlight it, can you see the differences in thickness center to side and rooftop to tip?
I am sure that I can, but actually I have not looked at that before. Give me 2 seconds to catch up a read to where we are, and I will tell you. So I'm just picking up a new one. I'm long scraping it fast. I'm clipping.
Is that a soaked read?
Mm-hmm.
I hope so. Otherwise it's not read.
Yeah. Yeah, I had dipped it before we met, and it still has moisture in there. So here's my scoop and curl. Scoop and curl without a lot of extra fixing. I think automatically I go back in and fix right away, but
Right.
I'm not doing that now. Scoop and curl, and over here. And now I backlight. See if we can find a way that I can backlight and you can see it.
Ooh,
Okay, so definitely the center to sides is really, really
dramatic. Yeah. Yeah.
But you
the one thing that I'm.
But you need to be more careful as you get towards the tip of the tip, otherwise you end up removing the tip, right?
Yes, exactly. So I'm seeing when I look at this, which is never a question I've never been asked, it looks to me as though the thing that I'm going to need to go back in and fix is pencil, like this area, right?
Yep.
There's
kind of
plenty of
yeah.
Yep, there's plenty of bulk in the middle there, which I like, but this region up here is not very cleanly sloped.
The reason I asked that is because as a scraper without slicing, from the very beginning I have all of that, and just now as I'm trying to slice, I've got almost a non-defined thin tip from rooftop to tip and center to sides. There's very little. So I guess it means I'm not holding the knife at enough of an angle to scoop. Okay, thanks.
Yes, that makes sense. Of course. Any other questions on this? Okay. The next things I do are probably much more specific to an American scrape reed, because what I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to clean up that corner, or that tip, as we discussed. But here's this reed that you just saw me do. It's got a nice beep and crow. The next thing that I do, which I'm thinking our short scrape people do not do anything like it, is I think about where the bottom of my heart is going to appear. For me, that's about 60 millimeters. And then I want to open up those windows below the heart. I'm thinking about maintaining some semblance of a spine. I'm definitely thinking about maintaining those rails, but I'm also thinking about slope. I want the windows to get thinner as they go, right up until immediately below the heart. So what I do is I scrape basically a vertical line in that window that as it gets more toward the top of that window, I press harder. So if you can picture, here's the curvature of the cane. Here's my knife, which is a straight edge. And so I'm coming in to this arc as a tangent, I think, if I remember right from my like 8th grade geometry. And I'm touching at only one point here in the channel. So I'm coming up and I can scrape as skinny as I want, but as I get up toward the heart, I want it to broaden and I want it to deepen. So I mash the reed a little bit and I get up there, and then suddenly I can get a much wider scrape. I start skinny and then I begin to mash it. And as you can see, I just get up to my 60mm line and I just stop. And I leave all that mess there, and then I can fold it over and brush it off afterwards. I tend, come on, let's brush off nicely now. There. I tend to not get too upset about any messiness that happens right in this area. I have not found in my own reed making that that's a particularly problematic area. If I get to a finished reed and I feel like it's like vibrations are not really flowing through it very well, that's when I will clean that up more with just gentle scrapes or gentle sort of diagonal work. But mostly I just scrape out that window. I open the window as wide as I dare right below the heart. And then I brush that away. If I catch up my other blade to that just a second, I'll backlight that for us too. There's my reed. There we go. It's not my tidiest work, but what I'm trying to show is that for me on my long scrape reeds, I do actually quite a lot. I put quite a lot of thinness in behind the heart. That's what I'm trying to get at. Does that make sense? Does anyone have questions or concerns about that? Ooh, no questions or concerns about that.
I do have an observation because I'm trying out my various knives.
Uh-huh.
Definitely can get the curl with one of my knives the best. So it does seem to have to do with the knives. I'll be curious what Maria has to say about this since she has so many tools at her disposal.
Mm-hmm.
So the curl, what were you calling it? The pop and curl?
Mm-hmm, the scoop and curl.
The scoop and curl. The scoop and curl. I have one knife that is much more willing to do that. So the Graf knife was the one I just removed the tip and then I proceeded to remove the other part of the tip too. So that was the wrong. It's a very smooth sharpness though with no burr. At least I didn't try to put a burr on that. So that might just be the wrong kind of blade. Just an observation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like it. So I feel like I've just walked, I guess the one other thing that I do to a reed ever is that when I'm in the heart of the reed, the thick part right in the center here, I do work in that heart. I'm not afraid of it. And my goal when I work in that area is to make the heart be very, very smooth and to make it be smoothly arced. So I like to think of the heart as thinnest on the sides, thickest in the center, and not actually knobbly like my knuckle there. So when I talked about this to students, I talk about just dusting the heart or just polishing the heart, using my knife with almost no pressure to just remove the tiniest amount of cane, working from side to side. It's the only place on the reed that I ever allow my knife to be directly in the center, and only, you know, on its way across to the other side. The other thing that I think is interesting here, reasonable people can disagree, right, about the bark on the sides of the heart. Plenty of like wonderful oboe players like leave the bark on the sides, and that's great, but I don't like it. I take it off. And what I like doing in the heart is just listening for it. You can hear under your knife the difference between the scraping, between scraping bark and scraping good cane. And I want to get to the good cane as fast as I can. Let's see, how am I miking this? The microphone is here by my chest. Let's try this. So that definitely may have been too subtle for Zoom, but what I hear when I do that is like scratch, 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 scratch again as I get to the sides, and I find that is true of the bark of the cane, and also of that sort of weird chalky stuff that's right below the bark sometimes. I don't like either of those things in my heart. I really want to get down to the smooth part of the cane, the good part of the cane, the vibrant part of the cane. So I'll scrape in the heart until the sound goes away.
So that white stuff is called, in German, it's called Parecym.
Ooh.
Parecym. I don't know what it's called in English.
I don't either. I just
know that in
call
German.
it that chalky stuff.
Sounds like paramecium, but I don't think that's what it is.
So it can't be the same, right?
I hope it's different.
Question?
Yes, please.
Did I just see it right when you were doing the heart work? You've got your plaque inserted quite far, like into the back. Is that even when you're working the tip? Or I didn't notice if you normally have it inserted that far.
I don't need it in that far if I'm working on the tip. It's the job of the plaque is to protect the back blade from the thing that I'm scraping, you know, to protect the rear of the reed from my knife. If I'm working in the heart, yes, I do need to push it in because I go all the way over the sides of the heart. But also my plaque is super skinny.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So like I have thicker plaques. Let me reach up and grab one. And I'll use a plaque like this, which I cannot bend with my fingers, for an English horn reed. I just like the bulk of having something to press against. Mm-hmm. But I'm actually much more cautious inserting a thick plaque like this into my reed because I do feel like it splays the blades.
Right.
So I love these real skinny ones.
Where'd you get those skinny ones?
You know, the only person I've found that sells them is Nielsen, and like she is in and out of having them in stock, and I have not succeeded in getting her to tell me where she gets them from. So like every time I see them, I order a jillion of them.
But they're metal, right?
They're metal. Oh, sorry. They're metal, and in the middle
If you
there.
told me, Jeanine, I would have ordered a second one from you. I decided I would order one too. I thought they were so cool.
They are.
Me
so
too.
Cool.
Me too,
like,
please.
Yeah, it's like 12, well, hundredths, I guess. Yeah, of a millimeter. As opposed to my thick plaque, which I've lost already.
Wow.
There it is.
Probably double it.
Yeah, my thick plaque is like 33, 34. I also found these sort of mini, like not quite as skinny, but pretty skinny, which are 22 maybe. I feel like actually, Abby, this may have been the one I sent you because I grabbed it so easily out of my drawer. It was on top. It's like just over 20. My super skinny one is about 12. My actual thick one is at 33.
Another heart question.
Yes.
So you have some tapering, like you said, arc
Mhm.
from rail to spine and then out to rail. But have you got any tapering from the catch to the top of the rooftop, or is it more or less even, so back to tip?
That's a really good question. I think that I haven't measured this actually. I believe that there is some. I believe that there is some slope in
Well,
the
you
parts.
put them in at the very beginning, right?
I put it in at the very beginning, yeah. But then I will sometimes find a read where
Right.
I will
Yeah.
sometimes find a read where like this part has gotten itself kind of thin, and as long as there's still some bulk up here, it's still okay.
Right.
So
You
that
long heart too.
yeah, so that leads me to question my assumption that there's a solid slope. But here's this guy that I just made. Remember this one? I'm seeing 58, and then in the middle it's 57, and then 54, and then here's the peak of the rooftop, 54. So yes, there is definitely slope through the heart.
And the next, it's a little observation. Or is that Ross gouge?
Inaletti.
Inaletti. Is Inaletti a single radius, or are you doing? Is it a double?
It's single radius because I just push it through once in one direction, right?
Okay. So I think this is an observation. The double radius is inherently thinner on the sides. So I think the double radius people generally tend to leave more on the rail, and we of the single radius, because I do a Ross as well, we tend to remove more of the rail, or remove the rail completely the way you do, because we've got more meat in the gouge there. Just an observation from what I've heard talking to single versus double radius people.
That is definitely interesting, although I also would observe that on my Inaletti, I can adjust the thickness of the sides a little bit, and I have done so to make it just a little bit thinner at the sides. Wait, so that, yeah, again, that's still that, no, that doesn't bear you out. That contradicts you.
Wait a minute, I don't understand. Vic, say it again really simply and like tune it into your theory.
Sorry, repeat that, Jeanine?
Yes, so your theory is, you're speculating that the double radius, which means that the sides are thinner?
Yeah, so the double radius gouge, where you do a pass on each, you do a pass down one side, flip the cane around, and then it does the pass on the other side. That's the 60-45 that we in North America talk about. So it is actually thinner at the rails than the Ross and the Inaletti if we do it as a single radius, with the pass down only one direction, has a thicker gouge, very slightly thicker gouge at the rails than the double radius. And so that changes how we have to address the rails on a single gouge scrape versus the double radius scrape. Our rails are thicker, so we can take more out at the rails versus a double radius, which is the rails are thinner. So if they take out at the rails, and that's a lot of the people who have rails in their heart, they've been using a double gouge, a double radius, and they can't take that out at the rails in the heart, otherwise it just collapses the reed.
The theory of what you're saying makes total sense, but I'm not sure that I actually buy it, because when I use a Ross, I do rotate it so that it takes from both sides.
But how much comes out in the rotation?
Not very much.
Yeah, mine usually gets like maybe one pass when I spin it. It's not like my teacher, who shall remain nameless, used a double radius, and he did 10 strokes one side, 10 strokes the other side, and it took off 5 or 6 strokes on the after the spin. Like it was dramatically removing.
Okay. Right. Fair enough. And my gouges are definitely not removing drama like that when I flip the cane.
There's one other aspect that could be playing a role in this discussion, and that is that The hardest cane is directly under the bark. So it could be that you end up with the same. So whether you take the cane out from the inside of the reed or from the outside of the reed, it will make a determination of whether you're using the harder bit of the cane, which is directly under. So in other words, if you have a thinner gouge, your sides are going to be making use of the harder cane. Then if you have a thicker gouge and you're removing cane from the outside so that the sides of the reed are actually in the softer part of the cane. So this is again the mobile that I always talk about.
Yeah.
If you tug on that one piece of the mobile, the whole thing starts to dance. So it's not as simple as saying, okay, thinner sides do this because, or thinner gouge sides do this because
it depends on a lot of things. Yes.
a lot of things, especially like that harder cane, which is under the, I guess the fibers are a little tighter at directly under the bark than as
yes,
you go to the center. You can
for sure.
You're scraping also. You can tell how the quality of the cane. Beata knows this. I always have to, she hands me these reeds and she's like, check these out. And I always think they're fabulous. But I can't tell about the reed until I've actually taken a knife to feel it. I don't actually take something off, but I don't feel like I understand the reed until I can like brush a knife across it. And then then I feel like I can grasp what's happening in it. I think that has to do with the quality of the cane. If you're deeper into the layers, it's softer. If you're more on the surface, it's harder.
Yes, 100% true. And is this relevant? I was going to talk for a second about the other way that I think about that heart. Okay, so what I generally do for my own reeds is I go thinnest at the sides, arc it across, and thinnest at the sides again, taking away that bark. But for many of my students and for some of the people I sell reeds to, their issue is what I find doing this, what I do for myself, is that taking off the sides of the cane there, the sides of the heart there, give me a lot more fluidity, a lot more connection between notes. It drops the pitch a little bit, but it makes it a lot easier for me to like move from register to register. And in contrast, some of my students do not have those same problems. What they need is stability. So in that case, I'll work in the channel of the heart, here and here, leaving structure at the sides and in the spine, which has the effect of lessening resistance while keeping pitch up. And that has made a lot of my students very happy when I figured out that I could use that rubric for them rather than automatically going to the sides of the heart.
Just want to point out that it's 4 minutes past the hour and Jennet is not obligated to hang out with us anymore. Fulfilled her official contract.
Does anybody else have any questions or anything I can like helpfully talk about?
I'm going to be very bold and post these reeds that I chewed on.
Ooh.
As I tried all my different knives, because I figured out some of my knives just don't do for me, the fascinating thing is the the chop and scoop.
Scoop and curl. I say scoop and curl.
The scoop and curl is absolutely fascinating. To me, this is going to be a key. If I can master this, I'm going to be so much quicker at my reed making. So I was bold today, and I'm going to pay for it by actually finding the courage to share what's lying before me. And I think that after we'll see you again, I guess, in 5 weeks, and hopefully by then that's going to be one of my bigger frogs. Bold and destroy some more so that I can get good at this. It's going to be one of those things that I think is going to speed it up a lot faster. I didn't really have a question. Sorry. Does someone else?
No, that's great.
I have a quick question. I mean, when we're when we're doing the cut and the scoop,
Uh-huh.
then if I look at what I just did, I see a definite line with
Mhm.
between the heart and the tip.
Yes.
So it's very pronounced.
Yes.
Does that have to be scraped down a little bit to create a little bit more leeway from the heart to the tip, or is that part of your? Because when you cut, you're automatically creating like a wall. How do you avoid that wall becomes too big?
I want it to be. I love the tip of the reed, right? I want that line. Let's see if we can see it here, or if I have to turn my camera around again. Probably you can't see it clearly. I can't get focus.
No, not really.
Okay, that's fair enough. Okay, I feel like
I see my line, so that's fine.
Fair enough. I feel like I want to be able to effortlessly see that rooftop with the naked eye. I want to be able to feel it with my fingertip. Like, I want that. It's a visible transition, but also when I backlight it, I want to be able to see, going back to my whiteboard. Love this thing. Okay, so that's totally visible. You can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it.
Yep.
But then if you backlight, there should be some like good stuff here and good stuff that sort of decreases along this way. And you can really look at that, again, the heart into the tip. You can look at that sideways across the reed. You can look at it with a backlight. You can look at it on the plaque, pressing your damp wood against the dark plaque to see just how that transition area is structured. And as long as it's not this, I think this is where all the magic happens, really.
Yeah.
So you don't want it to be too strong. You don't want it to be too unstrong, but it's totally worth experimenting with, like, exactly what is the structure that works for you. Okay. How smooth does it have to be? How sloped, or how like steeply sloped, or how gradual? Do you want to be able to push your grandmother up that slope, or do you want to be able to like swoop down it on rollerblades?
Yep.
I have one more question. If you would show us, demonstrate by turning your camera around and just demonstrate one more time how you sharpen your knife, because I do think that knife is a big determining factor for being able to do knife techniques. So we can figure out what angle she's using to sharpen her knife.
Okay.
Might be helpful. Can you put it at the side so we can actually see your angles?
At the side. How would I do that? Let's think.
No.
If I'm like this, I'm definitely above. Can I turn it like so?
Sure.
So my first maneuver is here at what I think is about a 10-degree angle. So it's about, oh, there we go. About like here. Yeah. Between getting my hands out of the way and getting my camera in place.
Okay.
So about like that. And see, I now know that what I'm doing is like taking care of the micro bevel. I learned that from you. But then my main sharpening stroke with my cutting edge up, I think it's about a 30-degree angle.
Yeah. That's gonna be an
30, 40
difference. I think that's what allows you to do the scoop and curl.
Yeah, I find that when I do this at Oboe Reed Boot Camp, and I've got 15 people in a room, and they're all showing up with like the knives they have. People who come in with like beautiful Landwell knives and Jennet knives with like their gorgeous sharpening equipment have more trouble with the scoop and curl than I do. And like, I'm not going to say that anybody's knives are wrong or bad. I am going to say that I have found that this very basic double hollow ground with this very basic and not particularly scientific sharpening system that I use. My last stroke, by the way, is totally flat. Just back one time. And it's the only thing I do with my knife. 10 degrees, 30 degrees, straight.
That's your rough side of that stone, right? Do you turn it over and sit it down on the other side?
Sometimes. It's not especially rough. It's still quite fine. But yes, sometimes I'll flip it over here. Same thing. And you know, there are some fabulous qualities to like the Landwell and Jennet knives, and I admire people who can get their knives perfectly sharp to a way that suits them perfectly well. Yep. I'm not saying anything bad about the Landwells, other than that they don't work for me.
I'll show you the reed I tried to do the scoop and curl with the Landwell knife with.
Yep. I mean, it's a quality knife. It's just, it's too quality for me. I feel like I'm a lowbrow knife kind of person, maybe.
Well, I will say something that I know about the Rigotti or the Chiarugi or whatever you want to call it. It's all the same knife.
Right.
And this explains the number of those knives that you go through with your high volume work. They're a fairly soft metal, which means you can sharpen them quite quickly. Hold the sharpness pretty well, I find. But that's part of the reason it's not just you and the high volume. It's just the nature of that steel. And Landwell knives and the Graf knives have a completely different quality of metal. There's something about the it's one of the softest knives, which has some really good advantages to it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I like these knives because they sharpen so fast and easily, because they hold their edge well enough, and because for me the weight of the knife and the thickness of this angle, of this double hollow angle, just suits what I need the knife to do.
Maria has
yeah, please.
Jennet, do you do all the work with just one knife?
I do. I actually have this, I mean, I have this other knife, which I don't even know what it is. I got it as a hand-me-down, and I resharpened it with Jeanine's, from Jeanine's class a few weeks ago. I got a great edge on it, except up here at the tip where it's got some damage. And I've been using this sometimes for my long scrape, just to get all the bark off and to sort of preserve my this knife and not have to sharpen this one so much.
But do you have to resharpen the knife when you cut the tip?
No. You mean when I clip on the cutting block?
Yeah.
No, I don't think about it. I will sharpen the knife when I start working, and then I will work for probably half an hour, 40 minutes, like turning out as many reeds as I possibly can, doing almost every step with this same knife, or sometimes every step with the same knife. And then when it begins to feel, and I'll move from section to section of the knife. Like I will, as I'm scraping, I don't necessarily use the tip of the knife and the tip of the reed or the middle of the knife for the windows. I'll just move around and look for the sharpest part of the knife.
Yeah. What grit are your sharpening stone?
Oh, please don't ask me. It's Spyderco's stone, and it's like very fine and extra fine or something. There's a ceramic, and I don't know the grit. I am such an unscientific knife worker.
Okay.
I'm sorry to say it. And sloppy in many ways.
Thank you.
Of course, you're welcome. I'm sorry to not be more helpful.
No, I like you are emotionally detached to scraping reeds. I am emotionally detached to sharpening.
Oh, interesting.
So I just go for whatever works, and it seems to work for me. Yeah.
Exactly. I feel like once I found a system that worked for me, I just sort of keep doing it, and I evangelize about it, but not very scientifically. And
I also find that you have to find the right balance. I mean, the weight of the handle has to be right in order not to scrape too much, not to have to make much effort when you scrape.
I would agree with that, although these Chiarugi knives that I've been getting for years have moved to a lighter weight handle, and at first I was a little disconcerted, and I'm working with it fine. I think the Rigotti version of this knife still comes with a black grenadilla handle, which is heavier. And I started using these knives when they were the Nielsen knife, and they came with a big old wooden file handle. And I find that the weight of the blade has remained consistent, and I am comfortable with that. The handle actually doesn't bother me as much.
Okay.
Although I feel that there has been an adjustment for me between the heavier weighted handle and the lighter. It's not been a big deal, but it is different.
Ah.
You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everyone. Any last questions? And we will see each other tomorrow. And one more time, we'll thank Jennet for her.
Thank you for having me, guys. This is
Thank
fun.
you.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
You're so welcome.
It's such a treat.
It's been a treat for me. Thank you.
All right, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
With a long homework.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Woohoo! Bye.